Fire Radio.
Hey everybody, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, a very special guest, Anthony Gaul out of Sergeant Bluff, Iowa. Chief, thanks for joining me today, brother.
Glad to be here. Glad that we get to talk again.
This is a long time overdue. You and I invited you on the show months and months ago, and we just never got it together. But in that time frame, I got to actually come out to Sergeant Bluff and visit you. Very kind of you to invite me out, and I did my Bridging the Gap program for your department. And we also, while I was there, I was able to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Sergeant Bluff Fire Department, which was special to me, with a small-town parade, civic pride. I mean, all of it, brother, was... I'll tell you, when you, it's so funny. It was like the Norman Rockwell painting of the fire truck on the apron of Main Street at the firehouse, and the two guys are washing it. Like that's the feeling I got when I was with you, especially for the dedication and remembrance of of your memorial that you put outside the firehouse, celebrating 100 years as a volunteer fire department. But then the parade. The small-town parade, brother, where we lined up all the apparatus, and then you had adjoining towns and other districts come in and join you for the parade, and a lot of fire trucks in the parade. And I got to ride with you and some family and so on in the Chief's vehicle with you. Let's just, small town, we'll start with this. You know everybody.
Well, I know a lot of people. I've grown up there, lived there since I was 2.
But there's a lot to that, right? Because you've been a fireman there for 34 years. It's the only fire department that you know, for the most part, right, that you've been a member of. I mean, you're very well connected throughout the county, state, so on and so forth. I mean, you know, everywhere we went, they knew you. But my point is, though, you growing up in the community that you serve, sometimes we lose sight of how rooted the fire department is to its community. And you guys have not lost sight of that.
No, it's been a great thing. I give my parents a lot of credit for that. They pushed serving others a lot. My dad was a longtime council member. He was the mayor of the community.
Okay.
It didn't matter if somebody needed a volunteer. He's like, we need to do this. This is good for our community. We want to make our community grow. We want to make it a very positive place to live. And that kind of caught on with all of my family. I mean, I had no history of family in the fire service. None.
Right.
I got on just outside of high school, and it was a bit of a fight to get on, to be honest. I was the young guy. Like, we don't want these young people.
Well, they had more than enough members at the time, right? I'm sure back then. And it was, yeah, talk to me about that. What did that look like?
It was, I started my senior year in high school. Hey, can we do this? No, we don't do that. We don't do that. And one of my good friends in high school, her name was Barb Bartling. She and I went schooled all the way together. Her dad was a member of the fire department. And he's like, nah, come see me. Let's go, let's talk. And he was a big proponent of getting the younger crew on because he had a vision. And it took a little while, but about a month after I graduated, I got on. A couple years later, my brother got on. 3 or 4 or 5 years later, my sister got on. And so it kind of started a young trend. And right now, if we didn't have young people coming on, we wouldn't have a fire department.
Well, I mean, I saw it firsthand. I had the pleasure to meet so many of your members, and a few of those members are your own kids, which has got to be fun for you. But to say that you grew up in a home where, civic-mindedness was at the paramount. I grew up very much the same way, and very similar stories. My father was mayor and councilman and planning board and library commission, all these things, and then he joined the fire department very early on too, and so on. And so it's kind of just how I grew up, and I think a lot of small towns, that's what it's about, is following through, and it's not just volunteering your time, but it's actually you find terrific pride in taking part and being a part of the community. I
agree.
Go ahead. Talk about it.
You go on responses that it's somebody's worst day.
Sure.
It may or may not seem like an emergency to us all the time, but it's their worst day. They're calling for help. They have no idea who else to call, and they use those 3 magic numbers. And if you have a connection with that person, their day goes a lot better. On top of solving that, they're like, They take a deep breath because you know them or you know their family, and you start to talk with them about that, and it calms their nerves a little bit. I mean, ambulance transport I had the other night, wonderful 90-year-old woman that I know. I've known her family, and we got talking about that, and pretty soon we're at the hospital. And that was the biggest part of her treatment, was having that voice. And when she couldn't get a hold of family, I'm like, hey, I have so-and-so's number. Do you want me to call him? Oh, would you? Yep, taken care of. And that's the part of it.
And I think that is what I'm getting at, is that, you know, you valued the ambulance trip with the 90-year-old neighbor to the hospital, where maybe in other parts of the country we've lost sight of that true connection, and it's just a numbers game. It's hustle, get out, next one, go, go, go. And what I love about that is when I was there with you, I saw firsthand your connection to the community and to the people. When we drove down Main Street, for lack of better knowing the area, there were people lined up 6 deep to watch this town parade. My community stopped having parades years ago because nobody showed up for them, right? And so I remember calling Terry, my wife. I called her while I was there, and I said, I sent her a video, actually, of all the people lined up. And I go, you'll never believe this. I said, this is Americana. I mean, this is what we want. We want our children to be waiting for candy to be thrown out from the fire trucks, right? You want to talk about leaving an impression on kids and families. That is how you do it. You become part of the fabric of the community, and the community supports you. It's happening still in small towns across the country. We need more of that, brother. And
we need to, when we get to your age, my age, we need to help impart that upon this next generation of why that's important. They don't always see the why. And I think, you know, as a teacher, that's huge for me, is to try to give people the why. Because until you do that, it doesn't make sense. You know, the 90-year-old ambulance trip, I think back 30 years ago when I listened to Steve Barry, you know, who wrote the I'm Not an Ambulance Driver little books.
Yeah.
And he talked about how this little old lady called him out on a transport where he has arms crossed and was all gruff, and why do you hate your job? And I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
But he got to talking with this lady, and he kind of threw that out as a challenge, and I love it. You know, I worked part-time in the county for many years, and I'd go on these hour-long ambulance transports, and you start asking people about, well, what did you do as you were growing up? Where are you from? What job did you do? And they get excited because no one's asked them about this.
Right.
At least not in a long time.
Yeah.
And you learn some pretty interesting stories that way.
Well, you are a beautiful human being, and I mean that. I'm not. That is absolute truth. I enjoyed spending a few days with you, and we spent full days together, right? We got to know each other pretty well, and between buffing at different firehouses and speaking with your department and partaking in all these different events and then dinners and lunches, like, we got to know each other pretty well over those short few days. But the one thing that I watched you do was you handled everything that came to you with grace, and you did it with an empathetic approach, which you put everybody before you. I saw it. It's awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's a compliment, and that's, I want you to understand, because I travel so much and I meet so many people, but Anthony, you are one guy that really stood out to me. Because I watched you do it day in and day out, whether we're responding to, we took in a small fire up in an adjoining district. We ran around the different departments. We had breakfast down in Sioux City Station 1, which was a real treat, and so on. So we had a full couple days. But every time the phone rang, you picked it up, and you're like, no problem, I'll take care of that. If somebody would come up to you in person, hey, what about this? You're like, no worries, I know who to talk to. Hey, I'll put you in touch. Always moving and shaking. You've been fire chief for how many years now in Sergeant Bluff?
This is year 16 I've been chief.
16 years. And here's the thing. A lot of times we get chiefs with longevity, and they're terrible. They just don't. They flatten out. Complacency sets in. They're not pushing, making change, and getting things better for the department. But I watched you day in and day out do that. We need leaders like that, brother. I want to ask you this, right? I know it comes from your upbringing and who you are. But I think what's really cool, too, you said something to me before we started recording, is that you are a teacher, and you teach for the Sioux City Career Academy, which is a high school, correct?
It is. It's our fourth public high school. Most everything we down here is career and technical ed, a lot of dual credit high school and college courses.
Yeah. So it's career focused.
It is.
And you run, what's the name of your program? I don't want to butcher it.
I run the fire science and the pre-hospital medical. I have 5 different classes I teach, and we partner a lot with some of our health science curriculum because we have these kids that think they have an interest in health science or the fire service, and we mesh a lot of these together to make them the most well-rounded they can be coming out and to help set them up for success. And then on top of it, part of my day I'm in charge of all the internship programs, and it doesn't matter whether it's accounting, culinary, mortuary science, or the fire service. I'm the one that gets to go out, check on them, set them up, and let them actually get some experience. You know, we're trying to give them the education, we're giving them some training, and then we try and find a way that they can go out and apply that and start to gain a little bit of experience.
You know, years ago, computers became very popular in the schools. They took out all the career-oriented classes. They took out drafting, metal shop, wood shop, auto shop. At least in my area, they took all those technical classes out of high school, eliminating any opportunity for kids to have an insight into something different other than a corporate job outside of a 4-year higher education in college, right?
And that's how it was for me.
And we have kids starving for opportunities, and college is not for everyone. And computers are not what they used to be because they're so commonplace today. So learning coding today is not what it was 10, 15 years ago, right?
No.
So we watch this resurgence of understanding we need to have career-oriented classes for younger kids so that they can make a better decision about their future. Well, I love what I saw out by you, man.
We love it, and we'll have kids try something and they find out they don't like it, and that's a huge win for us.
Yeah.
I want them to find out now before they invest thousands of hours and thousands of dollars, and we try and tie a lot of them together. I mean, our high school kids built 2 homes last year, complete homes.
It's awesome.
And they're going to build 2 more again this year, and then I get to bring my kids out when we do some building construction and say, hey, let's look at this before it's finished, and let's talk about all the parts and pieces. And this year we're going to go out with them, and one of the big requests I've had as I've traveled across and been at the National Fire Academy, said, hey, what do you guys want in your career departments? What are you seeing? What's lacking? And without a doubt, they all said, we have kids that don't know how to use hand tools.
Oh, 100%.
They said, we don't ever want to hear a plus and a minus screwdriver again. Teach them a regular and a Phillips. Show them how to pound a nail and pull. And so we're going to go down there this year, and we're going to have a tool lab, and they're all going to be pounding away, screwing screws, using ratchets, using socket sets, drills, so they get some of that, because that's been lost. People aren't helping do that as much anymore. And when they get into the firehouse, they stare and they go, I don't know what to do.
Which we took for granted years ago. You had that baseline knowledge of mechanical aptitude and equipment, abilities, right? And now today we have people that are joining the fire service that have never run a lawnmower, started a chainsaw, let alone even just use regular hammer and screwdriver.
Well, and it doesn't make them a bad person. They just have a different skill set.
They only know what they know.
Help them out.
Yeah, I agree. Your program, the fire program that you're doing in the public safety, incredibly rewarding, I would think, for you. And where I was going with it before was, you get to communicate and talk with this younger generation every single day. If anybody has insight into how we connect with them, it's you.
I'm blessed. I taught middle school for a lot of years, and I think middle school probably prepared me for the fire service more than anything, because most firefighters middle school about the same mentality. And the woman that I student taught under was way ahead of her time when she talked about connecting with people and brought in a lot of multiple intelligences, because not everybody learns the same way.
Sure. And
the more you can vary that, the better it works. And I've seen that with adults as well. And it makes me stay on my toes. There's no way I can be complacent, because kids will challenge you every day, and that's a great thing. And they don't want to sit and get. They want to know how it works. They want the why. So everything that I do, we're out experiencing it. When I learned building construction, that was probably the most boring lesson I could have ever had, because it was sit and read out of the book. Well, I'm fortunate. Sioux City's an older community. You know, it's 85,000 people, and we got buildings from the 1800s still. So we're in and out of type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 construction buildings. We're seeing where type 4 heavy timber has burnt, but it didn't affect it. They're able to point that out, and my kids can walk down the street and say, oh, that's a scupper. Oh, I can tell this is a type 3 building, and it's built before 1930 probably because of the mortar joints or this, and I see King's rows, and I see arched lintels, and
I love it.
They have fun with it. And so it means something to them. And then we can get to the point where we can use some things from the internet, and we can do some of the reading smoke, or we can look at a building and do a little size up with it. And some of my kids that are getting a little more advanced, I sent 2 of them. Chief Jones from Pittsburgh Fire Department was in town last year, and he did a National Fire Academy high-rise class. I sent 2 of my high school kids to it because there were spots open, and I went with them. They knocked it out of the park for a high school kid.
It's awesome.
And they had a ball with it because they had built that base, and they're able to continue on with it.
Yeah. Well, you said something that's really interesting to me. You enjoy being challenged every day. And these kids, the one thing that I have learned about this younger generation and subsequent generations after me is their filter continually gets turned down, where they're not afraid to put themselves out there to ask questions. Like me growing up, a lot of times we wouldn't ask a question because we were afraid to ask it. And the kids today, I find, are more inquisitive because they're information bound. They have information at their fingertips all day long now. So if they don't know something, they can type it into their phone and find out the answer real quick. So they're going to do the same with human beings. If they don't know, they're going to ask. They're going to ask that why. And the thing is, though, is, well, you do because you're confident in your abilities to deliver. And I think that this is one of those disconnects in the fire service where a lot of people feel threatened or challenged by the why. You certainly don't.
Well, and I have no problem admitting if I don't know something, because there are questions I'll say, you know what, it's a great question, I don't know, but I know a guy. I'll get back to you the next class. And I think I've heard you say it on different things before. That's why I can't sit back on my laurels. I tell people all the time, and it's why I brought you in. I said, not only do I want us to learn outside our zip code, I want us to learn outside of our area code, where it's a little bigger, you know, with the phone. And you've got to go out and hear from other people and find out what the current finger and pulse of the fire service is a little bit. Things have changed, and there are people not too far away from me that are still pretending it's 1980 and they're going to get somebody hurt, much less not know what's going on. And I greatly enjoy that with the students. And they're seeing so much on television and movies that is so horrible. And it has nothing to do with what's real in the fire service. And so a lot of times we'll dispel those myths. And tell you what I love, Jason Patton on Fire Department Chronicles, he will green screen himself in and make some of the most hilarious videos I have ever seen. And we'll show that. And we'll talk about what's right and what's wrong. And I had some parents come up, I can't watch you fill in the blank for whatever TV show. I don't want to, call them out on it, because my child calls out all the things that are inaccurate now.
Right. And they ruined it for me. Yeah, my kid ruined this show for me.
But I love it because they'll go home and they'll go, I didn't realize that.
There's an expectation, right? When we can reach these kids young and paint an accurate picture where they become involved, like in your classes, they get a real good understanding, which then sets the table for, hopefully, we get a return on that. Hopefully they get interested enough in fire, EMS, police, public safety, whatever it is, that they want to pursue it as a career. We hope, right? That's the intent of the class. But I remember you telling me while I was out there, how many students do you have going through the program right now?
This semester I've got about 100. Next semester I'll swap out some of those, and I'll add probably another 80 next semester.
So what I found really interesting was you said to me, a bunch of these kids don't go into the emergency services, but they get a real good understanding and base for what this is all about. And it teaches important lessons along the way, whether you decide to make it a career or not. That's the beautiful thing about the fire service, about public safety, about being civic-minded. It teaches invaluable lessons to the individual.
Well, the simple things, we'll spend 4 or 5 classes on fire alarm systems. And then we'll get into residential. And 98% of the kids don't realize that smoke detectors have expiration dates on them. None of them know the difference between photoelectric and ionization. And so we'll look at studies and tests and we'll show. And I'll say, well, what do you think? What do you think is best? And they'll give me their opinion after they've studied a little bit. And then they'll go home and they'll go, oh my. One young lady came back. She said, ours are 32 years old. We're replacing them tomorrow.
Right.
Ours didn't have a battery in. And, we always get to anything is better than nothing. But that's a lesson that they went home and told their parents. So we affected, in that one class, 28 kids that went and affected their parents and siblings, and other people learned from that. And our local fire department here in Sioux City, they love it. It's an outreach for them. And I had one that they couldn't afford necessarily to replace all their detectors. Well, Sioux City Fire Rescue, their community outreach office, community risk reduction, they have a program. They'll go do it.
Right.
They said, give them their number, please.
Sure.
We'll go out and do this for them.
Sure.
And they partner with that. And when we're done today, I'm going to one of our high schools to their culinary class, and we're doing fire extinguisher training, and then we're doing hands-on tomorrow. We started that 3 years ago. The next day after we did it the first year, high school kid was the only one at their fast food restaurant that knew how to use a fire extinguisher, put a fire out.
There you go.
So
there you go.
It's those little things, those life lessons.
Yeah. Does that come from your cooking? Like, you're good at putting extinguishers on food because you're a terrible cook, or what?
I'm just fortunate we have an amazing culinary teacher, and she works with us. Since we're going down this, I got to tell you this. When I was building this program, we do something called an honor cord for a kid at graduation.
Right.
If they earn 6 credits in one of our pathways, whether it's education to building construction to fire science, they can get an honor cord they wear at graduation.
Nice.
Well, I teach 5 classes, so that leaves us 1 short. Well, we can do an internship. We added medical terminology in because that'll help them. That could be their 6th class. Or they can take a semester of culinary.
Nice.
Because as I talked to these career chiefs around as they were on my advisory committee, they said, hey, that's going to benefit them if they can cook.
Yes.
That's going to win points. And so last year, Kelsey Miller, she got a $1,500 grant from the Iowa Beef Council. And so she said, let's partner with this. So we brought in 2 professional chefs. She got all the meat. I pulled the fire department 8-foot pull-behind grill up. They taught her culinary kids and my fire science kids how to hand-cut steaks.
Love it.
And then they got to grill them. They made kebabs also, did all this. Well, we invited the Iowa Beef Council up this year. They've given us more money. So we get to do it all over again. And these kids,
that's very cool,
learning how to cook, and it's amazing.
I wrote down 2 things here: awareness and head up. And I think what's really cool about this program, right? Not just your program, but the Career Academy for kids. It gets their heads out of their phones and it picks their heads up so that they become part of the conversation. They have awareness about them. You're talking about your kids walking down through the center of Sioux City looking at this aging city with new construction happening everywhere. And they have the best of both worlds, new and old construction. And they're walking with their heads up, looking around, and not with their heads down, looking down at their phones. And that, I think, is such an important part of education. And to do that through your programs is an absolute win, man. We're setting kids up for success with programs like this.
Yeah, I am blessed that I'm in this position. I was teaching middle school science, and I love middle school science. I mean, it was where I thought I would stay.
Right.
My principal at the time became the principal of the Career Academy. Her name was Katie Towler, and I owe her a great deal of gratitude. I just kind of off the cuff said, hey, if you ever want to do a fire science program, just let me know. Well, that last semester of middle school, as she was getting ready, she came and said, hey,
Yeah,
And,
remember that?
That first year back in 2018, I just did it part-time. I was down here for the first part of the morning, then I was back to science. And she let me build the program. We inherited a couple classes that were not good for the program.
Right.
They were trying to have a high school kid's first class be hydraulics.
Right.
And I went, no. And the dean of this part of the community college at the time, Dr. Hargens, she was amazing. She took a trip with me and a fire captain from Sioux City. We went and visited, and we said, nope, scrap this. We're starting new. We're going to make it make sense for kids. And it was so that we could build that awareness. You know, the first class that we do is so we could reach out and we can do so much with it. And it's all about, what is the fire service about? Who do you work with? What are the trends? What do you got to worry about?
Right.
My kids right now, they're the National Volunteer Fire Council. Another, I can't say enough good about. They put me through a electric vehicle and alternative fuel vehicle class, and so my first time teaching it's with my high school kids, and we're going down to a dealership tomorrow morning, and these kids have seen all this about electric vehicles. One, we had no idea, and they're just eating it up and eating it up. But it's because we have that culture that allows it. That they say, hey, do good things, run with this. Keep kids excited about learning in the topics that you're doing, and away we go.
Yeah. Well, I want to say this. I had a front row seat to it. We were there a couple weeks before school started, and you took me up to the school. First off, an absolute beautiful institution. It's modern. It's clean. It feels homey, but it's certainly a place that is inclusive and allows for education to happen. We walked past. I remember we walked in, said hello to a few people, walking through a lot of different moving parts because the school wasn't in session yet, so there's furniture piled up and everything. But you took me through through a few sections of the school. One, we passed an actual crime scene. Yep. Which I thought was super cool. And you explained, like, oh, the kids come in and they use this as a mock-up and they have to go through all the paces of it. I thought that was really cool. Walked into your classroom, beautiful facility, and equipment abound. And then we look in your storage closets in another classroom and another classroom, and there's equipment everywhere. And what struck me was the amount of equipment you had to share with these kids for their education. The other thing was, too, which is super important to you and to furthering the education, is the relationships you have with different companies and vendors that support your mission.
When I first started, I reached out to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I teach fire protection systems. And that doesn't make sense to kids unless they can put their hands on it.
Gotta get their hands on it. Right.
And so a local company here, Thompson Solutions, they built me an alarm panel. So I have my own alarm panel, smoke head, heat head, a pull station, carbon monoxide, a horn, and horn strobe. So we can set any of this off. The kids have to learn how to reset it, do it. I went Ruskin, another company. They didn't know me from Adam, and I said, hey, I'm doing this high school program, and I really want to be able to show these kids what smoke dampers and fire dampers are. They sent me a fire damper. They sent me a fully functioning smoke damper that my kids can operate in class.
It's cool.
And my kids are going out, and I'll use South Sioux, and we're in a unique place here. We're right where 3 states come together, and I have 8 kids now on the South Sioux City, Nebraska Fire Department. And when they go through their academy, there's a section on fire protection systems, and their captains and chiefs said, man, your students are teaching our people stuff.
Yeah,
about
100%.
This.
They know more than I do. I'll tell you that.
And that's not an area that firefighters are jumping at usually to learn, but they're hands-on with it. And I've asked, and I've had a couple different companies say, "Oh, here's a dozen fire sprinkler heads," and the kids can go through. They can say if they're upright, sidewall, pendant, if they're frangible bulb, or if they're fusible links, and then they're knowing the colors on the temperatures. I have 3 riser systems here in this building because we own the whole block. And so we're in different sprinkler riser rooms here, and they can tell me exactly how it works. One of my kids had he was on my department. We had a sprinkler line break. He was there. He knew how to shut the sprinkler system down. This is a high school kid. And so I'm feeling really good about this.
Yes.
And then now we have businesses around us say, hey, come in, take a look at our stuff. We like you coming in.
Well, I think like the fire service, right? When you become part of the community, the community will step up and help you, and if they can. And you have that with your program. It's fun to watch, and I was just really impressed by the magnitude of your courses and what it does for these kids and the equipment available to them.
Well, and I have to give a big thank you out. When I started to do this, there's so much with fire protection systems. I was a little overwhelmed.
Sure.
The legendary Captain Bill Guston. I've got his phone number. He and I have sat and talked on the phone a couple of times.
Sure.
And he gave me a heck of a playbook and a list of some things to look at. And in the fire service, fire protection systems, he's a pretty respected name.
Oh, for sure.
And
for sure,
I felt honored that he took time to help high school kids in Northwest Iowa.
Right.
And so once you say you're working with these youngsters, it's amazing who is willing to help, because it's not the norm.
But you're all in, bro.
I am.
And I think that is, it rightfully so. And I think that's the only way it succeeds, is somebody at the helm that is all in on their kids and on the program. And it doesn't stop. I mean, like I said, when we spent time together, there was never a time you turned it off. You know what I mean? I mean that. I'm very much the same way, but it was just fun to watch somebody else as dialed in as maybe I am as to their surroundings and what they do, whether it was helping somebody in the community, running a fire call, all of it, to working with your school, everything. It was just a lot of fun to watch and be a part of, and I truly I took away a lot from that trip. I had a absolute blast spending time with you there. You mentioned something which is really unique to you guys too, where you respond in your own department. You have Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa. We
do, and it was about a week ago. I was in South Dakota again, where you and I went and took in that small fire. Right. They called for some help. We got to go up, and they had a decent fire going, and they had 3 calls going at the same time. They had ambulances going 2 different places and a structure fire, and so we got to go up. And even the old guy here, it's not my fire, I got to put an air pack on for once.
There you go.
Figured out I need to do as you have been saying in your last few. I need to start exercising a little more.
Oh yeah.
But you look at that and that relationship. We don't put state boundaries in our way.
Right.
It's good people helping good people, and that particular department. I don't think I even told you the whole story. Years ago, you remember when the movie Burn came out about Detroit?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
So that was touring. And they had it at our Orpheum Theater here. They had a showing of it. So we had fire apparatus everywhere. And
sure.
Their chief said, hey, let's go out to dinner after this. And I had a couple people with me, and he had some. And that's when this all hatched, this mutual aid agreement across state boundaries. Yeah. We go up, and when they do their annual dinner, we run their calls for them. We'll send 4 or 5 people up. We staff their station.
Yeah.
They do the same for us. They train. We know they train. They know we train, and so it's a great relationship when we send people. And, we're not in a metropolitan area where we're going to get hundreds of calls. And so it's also building experience. They needed us for overhaul and things like that. That's great. We have people with hands-on. I haven't seen anybody complain about going to a fire and getting to do some work. And
never.
Our people were enjoying it. They were enjoying helping people is what they were enjoying. And it's neat to see residents. They're like, you came from Iowa? Yeah, we did. And that unique area with Nebraska, with South Sioux City, Nebraska, their chief, oh my gosh, he's amazing. He came from Vegas. Mm-hmm. Chief Koopman, and I was over there yesterday for their graduation ceremony. They just added 8 new members through their academy to get them the basic training. They're volunteers over there. They're a combination department. They have 3 full-time people per shift. They just got a town vote passed, so they're adding a 4th. They've got part-timers, and this is their largest volunteer class ever with 8, and 4 of them were mine from the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And so we work with them. We'll respond with them. They're getting to the point where they're going to have enough staff to respond out to help us as well.
Good.
Interesting, one of my kiddos that just got on, he had his first run ever Saturday.
Right.
Never been on a call before then. Cardiac arrest, his first call. And they got pulses back. And what a feeling for that young man. I mean, that's not the norm starting out in the fire service. I can guarantee that.
No,
but
definitely not.
He is the third young man in my classes in the last year that's had a CPR save. I had 2 seniors last year that had CPR saves.
You imagine, like, what that... I mean, you as the teacher, you're proud papa, right? Imagine what those kids are... The sense of accomplishment and achievement that those kids feel by being able to be a part of something like that because their education got them there.
Well, and you mentioned the proud papa. One of those was my youngest last year.
Oh, Cy?
Cy was in on a CPR save, and that gal walked into our station and took pictures with us a month and a half later.
Wow.
And that is an amazing feeling as a parent, as a teacher, as a fire chief. You just have this enormous sense of pride saying, those people busted their rear ends, and this person is better off now because of them.
Your kids all joined the fire department with you, right? Carson, Cy, and Allie, right?
They did.
I didn't have a chance to meet Allie. I met Carson and Cy. Carson's also a fireman in Sioux City as a career firefighter.
He is.
We got the jump over there. You just pinned him, right? He just got off probation?
Just got off probation. He's loving it. He is now floating. He just got done working a 48 this weekend. He got some overtime.
Good.
And so he's loving working with all these different people. It's a great job. He is in debt to the people that have helped him out. And it's kind of funny. One of his officers at Station 3 in Sioux City is where they do all their training.
Right.
And he ended up, Lieutenant Ryan Baker was on the engine with him. Well, I had Ryan as a 6th grader. And then
I love it.
Next semester, I have Ryan's son starting in the fire science program.
That's very cool.
So it's been a fun thing. And Cy, my youngest, he passed the written test for Sioux City. He takes the CPAT here in another week or two, and we'll see what goes here. I've got 20% of the remaining list of people testing for Sioux City are former kiddos of mine from the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm excited. I hope some of them will make the list and find a great career there.
It's one thing for your own kids, obviously, right? Growing up in your home and seeing your commitment to the community and the fun and family that comes with the volunteer fire service and Sergeant Bluff just makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But then you look at the bigger picture, and when everything you're talking about comes back to your program and the school, and like when you can, 8 new kids, 4 of them are mine. 2 had CPR save. Another kid has CPR. Like all these things, you're talking about 20% of the list is kids that came through your program. Like this is what we need more of in this country. We need career-focused education with kids at a younger age so that they can start understanding that there's other things out there other than a 4-year college for them. They can get into the emergency services. We can give them a foundation. If we're out there teaching carpentry, HVAC, welding, vehicle maintenance and mechanicals, all these different programs, why do we not have programs for the fire service?
It's amazing how few and far between they are. And you try and use the almighty internet to Google it or anything like that, and you struggle to come up with these programs.
That's right.
You introduced me to a gentleman from Pennsylvania. So he and I have had a couple conversations. Former chief from South Sioux City, Nebraska is out on the East Coast, and he's got a program. So he and I start to talk. But we're trying to expand this. What I would love to get a conference together somewhere. And I've seen talks of this, and it gets canceled, where we could bring some of us together that do this. Say, this works, this doesn't work. How's this affecting it?
Is there any? I was just going to ask you. Is there an association or anything that is formalized for education of younger kids for the emergency services? Do you guys have a group?
No. There's a couple people I've seen try and reach out in the past and start something, but nothing official. So maybe through your contacts.
Well, I'm gonna
National Fire Radio. You've got a great audience.
Well, let's say I'll put it right here at the 39-minute mark of this podcast. I'm going to mark it in my book so I can cut this clip up for social media. If you're part of an educational class or school that promotes the fire service, fire science, and I'm not talking about college level, I'm talking about high school level, We're looking for high school level technical classes or schools that focus on the emergency services, fire, EMS, emergency services. You could even throw police in there if you want. We're looking for people that have programs through accredited education departments, right? I mean, this has got to be, funded. This is an educational thing here. So it's got to be, organized classes for promoting the fire service or emergency services. We want to hear from you, and I'll put links in the bio and stuff on this or the description so people can get a hold. But we want to hear from you because I think that there's so much. Anthony, listening to you telling me how many kids have come out of your program and have gone into the career services or the volunteer services, have saves, do this, do that, it's invaluable. We need more classes like this, and we need opportunity for these kids. We have to provide more opportunity, and if we want to protect the future growth of the American Fire Service, we need to educate at a younger age so that they know what the expectations are coming into this job.
Well, and the other thing I think that we're really benefiting is these young people, they're used to learning. They don't have the family commitments to try and balance with this right now. So if we can get a good base of education into them, some training, some experience into them at this age, and then they can get out with a department who can take them to where they want them to be. We're not making the greatest firefighter since, the creation of the earth here. We're getting them a good base knowledge, and we're getting them some passion to try and ignite this interest for them, and then another group can take them even further. And the amount of time we had the Iowa League of Cities, so it's like the city managers and clerks and the council members and the mayors, their annual convention was here in Sioux City last week. And they said, hey, we've got a group of 20 or 30 people that want to come and tour the Career Academy as a breakout session. We're like, absolutely, bring them down. And we got into not the career, but we got into even smaller towns with volunteers. They're like, how can we do this? We can't find enough people for our community. And I think you've mentioned it too, it's just as valuable to recruit people for that, because if we lose the fire service in a community, well, you're not going to have a lot of a community left, nobody to protect them. Their insurance rates are going to go sky high. They're not going to have those things. So I love the fact that I have kids that are career, they're part-time, they're volunteer, and some of them are just out promoting, saying, hey, Mom, Dad, this is an important thing. You should help when this comes up. Or when they're asking for this piece of equipment, this is what it means. And I think that connection with the community is amazing. Now, I've got kids from other communities that want to come here.
Yeah.
And we'll take them, but there does have to be an agreement. The school district has to let them come here from wherever they're coming from.
But the other thing, too, and it should be said, Anthony, is that you have more enrollment than you can take.
I do.
So you have kids that want to get into this program, and they can't even get in.
We do. Sometimes it's schedule, sometimes it's age, but we've had numerous kids we had to say, sorry, we're full on this semester at this time. And it's kind of neat. I have, I teach the community college's curriculum. That's how they get the credit for this as far as college credit, too. But I have more kids in a year than they may be able to get in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's fun, but then I'm feeding into them, and some of these people can take them and take them to the next level, which is amazing.
There's a turnover rate in the fire academies across the country, and I think a lot of it has to do with not having a good expectation of what the fire service is truly all about until they get into the academy, and then they realize this isn't for me. What your program does very early on is it sets the expectation and standards. And so I would think that most kids that come out of your program, if they decide to go into furthering their love for the fire service or emergency services, they already know and understand what's expected of them in this career.
And we're trying to make that better. Getting that culture of what a firehouse would be is tough in a school setting.
Oh, for sure.
But you had George Glass with you a few episodes ago. So I've had George come into my classroom.
Nice.
And George just kind of lays it out how it is. And it's so good. Kids want that. They don't want fluff.
Yeah.
They want real. And I love when he comes in, he stresses something different than when I have Sioux City's fire chief come in. The chief kind of lays out the process and answers great questions and does an amazing job in that area. Then George comes in and breaks it down to the nuts and bolts of, here's what you got to do.
Yeah, right. The kitchen table talk, right?
It is. And you bring in those people from around the area because they're all experts in their area. And they have a passion for different parts of this. And when I'm out and I meet people out in Emmitsburg, Maryland at a class, that's just as much about me hearing from them and what they find important in their department as it is in taking the class that I'm in out there. Because then I can bring that back and go, you know, I never thought of it that way because I'm not in that role that particular firefighter, officer, chief officer is in another part of the country, and I'm not in a career role with it. So I have a different perspective, and I need to hear that perspective from them. And it's been great listening on the podcast with some of your guests talking about what's the expectation in the firehouse when they come in, and it's all pretty much the same. You know, they're looking for people to put their nose to the ground and get to work and say,
but imagine the quality of our candidates. Whether career or volunteer, imagine the quality we're going to get if we can start them early enough at a time that they're most susceptible to learn and they're interested and they can still be molded and shaped, and we can give them a real good background about what the fire service stands for, what it's all about, the dedication, the sacrifice, your willingness to go above and beyond. We can paint that expectation for them long before they get into any of our fire academies. I would think that the success rate is just, through the roof.
I agree. I think that is one, and I think the physical expectation is another one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That, I think between those two, we can really up the game and give people better candidates. It's a physical, labor-intensive job.
Yeah. I know, man. I know, speaking with departments, career, volunteer, and everything in between across this country, they are having a hard time getting the best possible candidates that we used to get. The numbers are dwindling. We're not getting the amount of people that used to apply, let alone the quality of the applicants has gone down. And it's because I think we've become a different place today. It's a catch-all in some regards. And unfortunately, the emergency services is not for everybody. No. And if we can paint that picture up front and set the expectation, I think the process is better and we get a better candidate.
I would agree. And then, we've also got that volunteer world where there can be a job for a lot of different people in that. Not everybody is going to be the person that put the air pack on and run into the building.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
And so,
where do you fit in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a little more freedom in that volunteer world sometimes than you do in the career world, where you got to be able to do all 15 or 20 or 300 or 400 of these things if you're going to be this career firefighter, because you can be in any position. In some of our smaller towns, the 70-year-old is still on the department because nobody can run a pump better than them. And they still have a great role. They have a lot to pass on.
Yeah, I agree.
It's amazing what they can do and what they've seen and some of the stuff they've forgotten. So it's a great thing for us there. You met Rick Wilson when you were out in Sergeant Bluff, and I think you get to see the house that Rick built in our training maze out in our back building.
Yeah. I was trying to put the name to the face. I got him now. Yes,
he didn't have a plan for that. He built
incredible
because he and I would go and travel, and he would take a look at 4 or 5 other places over the wintertime when it was crappy out. He went in there and built a 4-level training maze with no plans.
Craftsmanship, man.
Trap doors and doors that swing 180 degrees and ramps, and that gift will be there to our community long after he and I are gone.
Yes.
And that's a contribution that maybe some of our people don't know.
I think one of my favorite things about when I do my class, the Bridging the Gap class, is you and I chuckled a little bit in the beginning. You're like, I'm excited for my people to hear this, and I think some people need to hear it. And I'm like, yeah, it's everywhere. Sometimes, we get disconnected. And so I think the message resonated pretty well. I was very happy with the outcome of the class that night. I thought it was, one of my better ones. That, some nights you're just on, and some nights you're, it's like, oh, I wish I was a little tighter with that or whatever. I thought it went very well. But what's fun for me is you pick out the faces in the crowd that you go, okay, this guy is going to be my challenge. She's going to be my challenge. This guy's going to be a hard ass on me. And you pick them out real quick. What's fun for me is when I'm done teaching, those people come up to me. And where I go, this was the hard ass in the group, comes up to me at the end, and you share laughs and stories. The next thing you know, they just keep talking. Like you open something up in them, and now they want to just share with you. And he was one of those guys, and it was awesome. And if anything comes from my class when I teach and go around is if I can get those older guys or girls to open up and share their stories and so on, I think it's a win because there's other people there listening and they probably didn't know, half the stories that I can drag out of people. But man, it's so fun to be able to get that. And your department was no different than any other. And in fact, the amount of passion and care that your members have for their department was on full display, brother. And it was just really well regarded by me and so on. It was a great opportunity. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Well, and I love too that the reason for bringing you out, I wanted to do something for our 100th anniversary. I wanted our people to hear a different view than maybe they're used to hearing. We talked back to that getting out of the zip code and area code.
Yeah.
So as I'm reaching out and I'm like, gosh, what can I do? We have a mutual friend, Todd McBride.
Yes.
And I talked to Todd because he travels across the world
for
his business with the fire service. And he had mentioned, so I'm like, I'm going to reach out. And then you were pretty quick and called me back when I reached out. And I'm like, okay, I like
good opportunity.
This. And you had said, hey, I've never been to Iowa.
Never been to Iowa.
And so I said, all right, this isn't going to be just about Sergeant Bluff.
It was exactly what I thought it was going to be.
I wanted you to see the area. And, Chad Parrott down in Council Bluffs, you got off the plane. My son Carson and I pick you up. And
that's right.
We're chatting. He's got 3 or 4 probies down there in Council Bluffs that he was working with. I bet we talked for 45 minutes.
Yeah, they were just running lines. I think they were doing chauffeur training or something, right? Locking the guys in on pump training.
Yeah, and then one of their chiefs comes and he starts talking, and it's no different anywhere we went. You got to see a little bit about what it was like here. They got to hear a little different message. We get you up, and you made it to a lot of different places, impacted a lot of people, and we got to Sioux City. And Sioux City has their own small podcast they do. And
yes,
Devin Shipper comes around the corner and he's like, no way. He knew exactly who you were. And Chief Fulton pulled him and another firefighter, Ben Moorhead. He pulled them off the rigs that night, moved people around to float so they could come down and listen to you.
Right, which was super cool.
That was great because we got 8-9 different departments had people at the presentation to hear and spread that through the area, and that message needed to be heard.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I think it just made sense. I mean, everything we did was built on the relationships that you've made, and every stop we made, every contact I met was somebody that you have a story with and some laughter with, and. And I think one of the real highlights for me outside of everything that we did was the breakfast we had down in Sioux City at Station 1, right? Was it Station 1, right? Engine 1, right?
Engine 1, Truck 1.
We had breakfast down there on a Sunday morning.
Yes, sir.
Sunday morning breakfast. They opened their doors to us, had a great meal and even better conversation. And I think that was a 2.5-hour breakfast or something.
And that is probably the epitome of what the firehouse table is about, and something that I can share with my students because I don't get that every day. I mean, that's a career department. You come in, and I don't know if there were less than 30 different topics talked about at that table. I mean,
we solved the world's problems that morning, or at least talked about them. I don't know if we solved them. But that's where my friendship with George Glass came from. And then George was just on the podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Because we had such a great back and forth that day over breakfast that I said to him when I was leaving, I said, I'd love to get you on the podcast because the conversation we had there to be a fly on the wall and to listen to it would have been beneficial for everybody. I mean, it was just great conversation. I'm sure conversation like that's happening in every firehouse. But we were able, and George and I really held court, if you will, and then everybody else there was kind of listening and chimed in every once in a while. But, man, we hit some really good stuff. I mean, it was just a great morning. Great morning.
He's one that puts, if he says it, he means it, he does it. I've been at a regional fire school, and I partnered up with him as we're stretching hose lines, and that guy works hard.
Oh, yeah. You can tell.
He works hard, and he's a great person to be around because if you want to learn, he will help you learn.
Yeah. There was one other thing that stood out, and I wrote it in my notes, and I need you to remind me of his name, but you and I, who was the older gentleman with the props company that we sat with? The old guy. I bought his book while I was there, the fire photographer for...
George Lindblade.
George Lindblade.
George is the official photographer for Sioux City Fire Rescue. George worked in Hollywood. He's worked in television production. That guy has some of the most amazing stories.
Wild.
That's why I wanted you to meet him. You bought his
book.
A
picture. I posted a picture of us sitting in his room with him, and I posted that on social. That was a real special moment for me. We were there for at least an hour.
Yeah.
Or more. What a special treat that was.
I have went up and spent a couple sessions like that with him myself.
I'm sure.
And just sit and learn. And he's shared with me pictures from the 1950s. I've got on a flash drive from Sioux City Fire and fires in there and some of the history of that. And it's been great that I can share that with my students.
Yeah.
Look at where this has come. And I've got, in fact, I'm looking at it right now in my office here. I've got his book there where we can go and look at the history of the Sioux City Fire Department.
Sitting with him was one of those moments that brought me back to many, many years ago when I had more older guys like that in my own department, and I would just sit with them and listen. And when we were sitting there that day, and unbelievable conversation, but it's like talking with an old guy. So it's like you're like you want it to go faster, you want more, but you just got to have patience and let him go. And we did, and it was a moment that I will never forget. And just a colorful and charismatic guy with an incredible history in Hollywood. They still do things in Hollywood, and his connection to Sioux City. And we need more of that in the fire service. We need older guys to tell stories, and we need the younger generations to be listening. And it's important.
It's very important. And when you were here, we talked a little bit about the importance of that. I'm living in a great place here at the Career Academy. The Sioux City Public Museum is in our building. The school district owns the whole block. And so I have all this history there. They let me wander through their archives.
Nice.
And I got to pick stuff out. They have an Anthony Gaul list now. I can email the education coordinator, and they'll pull out wooden water main, old air packs, speaking trumpets, everything, and they'll set them up in a classroom, and I can bring my kids down. They can see them. They can touch them. They can understand some of this. And then they have 3.5-minute videos on the history of disasters in Sioux City, and we've had some big ones.
Sure.
The block across the street from where I'm sitting right now is burnt a couple of times back in the turn of centuries. And then Flight 232 with the crash in the late 80s and flooding. And so the kids get opened up and they're like, we didn't know about any of this.
Right.
Oh, well, of course you're not. And so we relay that history on, and then one of the gentlemen down there, he'll go with me later in the year as we do a walking tour of Sioux City and talk about the buildings and what they used to be and what's burnt. And I just sit back and go, wow.
Yeah.
Because I like it. The older I get, the more important history is to me. And the kids.
And that's coming from a science teacher.
I know. But next week we get a shrink wrap kids in class. And when we're learning air pressure. So I still bring some of those back. And
there you go. It's good.
Yeah, it's a great thing. And, if people are listening till the end here, if you have great ideas, if you say, hey, have you ever thought about trying this with these high school kids? I'd love to hear about it. That's how we make the class better. I ask the kids, what do you like? What do you don't like? Why? If it's because it's difficult, well, suck it up. We're going to get there.
Right.
But I want to make sure I stay in touch, and the fire service across the United States has amazing ideas. And so if anybody wants to reach out and say that, I've had some bigger names do a little video Skype in, or whatever platform you want to use, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and speak for 5 or 10 minutes. Take a look at what we do. I love when people look at, I share everything I can on social media. The kids like to see themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
We like to have a contest with it, and I love it. People comment and say, hey, that's amazing. Have you ever thought of this too? Oh, no, I didn't. I'm going to try that.
Right. Well, I can tell you this. There's no lack of excitement and love for what you're doing. I have the word passionate written down about you, and I think that's exactly what it is. And whether it's in the classroom or as the chief of your fire department, you are all in on your people. I've seen it. I watched it firsthand. I see it every day on your social media for your class and the school, that the programs that you've built there. You are truly affecting change for the better in the fire service in your area for emergency services, brother. So, really well done, and honored to know you, call you a friend. Can't wait to get back out that way. I'd love to get back out there. I had an absolute blast while I was in town with you. It was a lot of fun, and we finished with a great dinner that night and some good conversation, and so on.
I think we still get some ice cream.
Yeah, I know. Here we go. So that waiter was. I didn't even order it. I didn't even want it. You forced it upon. Anyway, it's a whole nother story. But we had a lot of fun, and we spent some good time together. And out of it, that's what I think the best part about the fire service is it brings people together, and so I'm better for it. And I just appreciate everything that you did for me when I was out there. And whatever I can do for you. But I do want to challenge people that are listening to this episode. If you know of a course or curriculum that exists in the fires in the education system at the high school level, we want to hear from you, because Anthony and crew are trying to get and find more classes and people that are out there that are doing what they do, so they can help spin ideas and talk about what the future looks like. And so if you do, email us at podcast@nationalfireradio.com. I'll pass it right over to Anthony and send the leads over, and you guys can connect. I've done it already with one or two guys, and I'm going to keep doing it as more people come to my life that are running in the same lanes. I want to put them together, because I think that's where we excel. So, Anthony Gaul, thank you, brother. Thank you for joining me today, man. A lot of fun talking with you and seeing you again.
Appreciate it, and hopefully in the near future I'll venture out to New Jersey.
You're always welcome, pal. 25 minutes outside New York City, so come on out. Let me know when you're coming. We'll get together for sure. Love to have you.
Thanks, sir.
Awesome. Stay right here. I'm going to sign out the podcast. I'll come right back, okay?
Sounds good.
Very good. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Anthony Gaul out of Sergeant Bluff, Iowa. Small-town fire chief, big impact. Big impact through the Sioux City Career Academy and the amount of kids that he's putting into the emergency services. It's unbelievable. I saw it firsthand. Honored to know him, call him a friend. And like I say at the end of every episode on the podcast, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.